it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We will be talking about running, mental health, youth sport burnout, specialization in sports, motivation, encouragement, coaching, parenting, sleep, nutrition, really anything that you can think of that we as parents or coaches or just runners can do to help our young athletes. In today's episode, I get to talk with Niraj and RT from the Stride Shop. They share all kinds of really valuable information about how to stay healthy as a runner, how to have longevity in running. We talk about warm-up, cool-down, strength training, building days instead of recovery days. So much information in there about how we can keep our bodies functioning as we want them to, or possibly even better. So I'm sure you will learn something just like I did. So check it out.
So my name is RT Hill. Niraj, Vora is the other part of the Stride Shop. We are a physical therapy clinic. We originally started in New Orleans, and now Niraj has moved out to Baton Rouge and is helping the good people there. But kind of when we first kicked it off, the idea was that we would center around running related injuries, and not necessarily just injuries, but also kind of the coaching aspect of it as well. And then once you're healthy and running and things like that, how do we improve people's longevity in doing a sport that is just filled with repetition, which tends to be chronic nagging injuries that happens, And so we both of us are I identify as runners at this point. We get out enough miles a week to where we can claim it. More so, I think both of us were just athletes growing up that found this as a hobby and kind of got into the running community, which was a cool experience because it is, to a lot of people, you see someone running and you're just like, oh, that seems silly. Why are you doing that? But then you kind of get into it and you do it with people and you see how you interact and intertwine and see different parts of your city, and it can be this really cool kind of thing that's one, physically helpful, and then also mentally a great addition as well, or mentally beneficial. And so that's how we kind of got kicked off and started. I didn't really say much about our experience or anything, but I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, went to LSU for college, and then to LSU Health Sciences in New Orleans. And I kind of moved all around the U.S. doing travel PT for about 3 years. I've worked in competitive baseball training facilities, clinics. I've worked on horses and dogs, and the latest adventure for the past 3.5 years has been getting into the mind and psyche and physical world of a runner. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a different background than RT. He's been all over the place. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then I went to LSU as well, and then traveled to the Midwest for graduate school and practiced in Chicago for 11 years and started seeing some runners and endurance athletes in Chicago. And I had been running. I kind of took up running after undergraduate school when I was done with soccer, and as I saw more and more runners and I began to run a lot more myself, it just naturally kind of fell into place where I just became more and more interested in training and the physiology and everything to do with running. And so after RT and I met in kind of a sports medicine clinic in New Orleans, it just became something that kind of fell into place and something that we were both passionate about. So the Stride Shop has been an awesome experience. We've treated a ton of endurance athletes and runners, and kind of feel like we have a bit of a handle on what the experience of runners is, and that usually is people telling them to run less when things go wrong, as opposed to trying to figure out how to do it right. So we're hoping to kind of give give people a way to do things a little bit better, to stay just to stay healthy a little bit longer and to run longer.
Before I actually get into the questions I told you I was going to have for you, it already just sparked some thoughts I had, because you'd mentioned like the repetition and how that can lead to injuries, but also people saying like run less. And I feel like one of the common things, especially if you're talking to a non-runner, is, oh, you run, like that's bad for your knees. So just because I have you both here as a captive audience, what do you have to say about that notion? Because I imagine it's not just that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of mentality that runners face when it comes to a lot of things, right? Like why you're running that far, why you're running that fast, why you run that often. And the truth of the matter is there's not really any evidence to suggest that recreational runners are doing damage to their knees or joints. In fact, I think one of the most kind of cited research articles is that recreational runners are at less of a risk of osteoarthritis than would be a sedentary or mildly active individual. Now, when you get into some of the people who are running high volume mileage, and I can't remember exactly what it was in the study, but I think it was over 60 miles a week for several years. Then you start to see the incidence increase again. But I think we're learning so much more about how to take care of our bodies and still knock out higher volume mileage that we may see that change as well. But yeah, running is not bad for your knees whatsoever.
To that point, Niraj, I've kind of had this evolution of how I talk with runners about that as well. One is you trying to get people to understand that, right? It's not terrible for your knees to go out and run. Same thing for lifting. For heavier lifting, you see actually an improvement in knee cartilage with some heavy lifting stuff. But once you get into those high mileage, I kind of modify that into poor running for years on bad mechanics, what that may be for some person, but kind of not listening to your body and just thinking, I'm going to run through it, I'm going to run through it, I'm going to run through it. Then people can get into the weeds a little bit with that. But as a general concept and term, no, evidence just isn't there that running's bad for you. The opposite, actually.
Well, that's reassuring for sure. Okay, so I guess we will get into the things that I had said we would talk about, which is, I mean, at least for me as a runner, and I know that, I sometimes go with like the stereotypical runner idea, but I also sometimes deviate from that. But accessory work for runners, so things like warm up, cool down, strength training, to me is not stuff that as a runner I ever really want to worry about, have to do, think about. I don't find those things to be the most fun, but I also, because I know that they're valuable, will do those things. But can you talk to us about like that accessory work, or if there's other stuff that I didn't list because I am not an expert, that actually we as runners should be doing to stay healthy? I know that was a long question.
No, that's great. RT, you want to start? We'll probably take it in pieces.
Yeah, I mean, with this at a few different things. I'll take one, you take one. I'll take one, you take one. I feel like we can kind of probably ping pong this back and forth. Let's start off with the warm up. Yeah, you should absolutely do it for a few different reasons, and it doesn't have to be the super elaborate kind of thing, but something just to get the body prepped. One, physically, you're warming up tissue so that you're not putting as much of a stress on it once you start going. Two, you're circulating blood flow, you're circulating oxygen and nutrients, things that muscle needs to actually be able to work appropriately. And then there's this third one that I typically mention to people, and that's the nervous system. If you just put on your shoes and get outside and start running, right, your brain doesn't know what you're running for. And so the immediate reaction is that it is going to be a little bit tight for the first mile or so until you start to realize, oh, I'm doing this for general health. I'm not in a threatening situation kind of thing. Right. So when it comes to warm up, it's, Niraj with a lot of the coaches or a lot of the clients that he coaches, it's a 8-minute walk to start off with some some basic movements, right? It's not
Yeah.
a 20-minute build into this thing. It's get out there and walk at an appropriate pace and just try and get the tissue ready and prep to do some work before just going out and taking off and just, waiting for that first mile or two to be over with so you can start to feel good in your run.
Yeah, you're right. I do prescribe an 8-minute walk, and then cool down. I think it should be the same in some sense, right? So as much as it's challenging for your body to go from cold to on, the same happens when you go from on to off, right? Your body is just going to respond better, recover better if you spend some time, quote unquote, cooling down. And so I do the same thing. It's easier for me to convince runners to do some kind of warm up. And so the cool down, if somebody hangs with me and is an athlete of mine for a while, I can kind of then throw in the cool down and convince people to do it. But the idea of spending another 3, 4, 5 minutes walking after a run, it doesn't have to be elaborate, it doesn't have to be huge, but don't finish your run, throw your shoes off, and sit down and lay there for the next 20 minutes. It's probably just not going to be helpful, right? And we've all been there. We've all done it. After a race, you just sit there, and that's fine. But the majority of the time, you should spend some of your effort on cooling down. Whether that be, for some people have found that stretching's super helpful after a run. Some people will foam roll after a run, and some people, like a lot of my athletes, will just walk a little bit after a run. I think that there is purpose and value in doing it. Also, Tori, I think part of, and this is not directed at you, but I think like things like recovery day or accessory movements kind of make them feel like extra stuff, right? Whereas like just that switch in what we call them and how we refer to them might change our mindset on them a little bit, right? So like even warm up, cool down, sometimes isn't quite the most appealing thing, but if it's just part of your routine, like I'm going for a run and I always start my run with this, or always end my run with this, or I've got run work to do today, right? Like those things just make it seem a little bit less boring or monotonous than some of the words we generally use to refer to them.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because in other things in life, it's all about like how we refer to stuff and the way we are labeling it. So that totally makes sense. Now I feel like I'm gonna have to come up with, okay, so if I'm not talking to you, how do I describe it then? If I'm talking, like you just said, obviously it's like part of your routine. But I guess like strength training, do we just say like it's strength training, right? I shouldn't be putting extra labels on stuff.
Yeah, no, I've been trying to come up with something good for a while. So if you come up with something, let me know. But like I think recovery days could easily be just like building days, right? And like they're how you rebuild, they're how you recover, but rebuild and recover kind of has a connotation of like doing nothing or being lazy, but your body's building, right? So you could call them building days is I guess what I've used recently. And then strength training days, I don't know if you call them running work or you call them like, I don't know. That's a hard one for me, but I think that like if they just are part of your training, then you can just kind of refer to them as training, right?
I'll lump it under the umbrella of training as a whole. It's just kind of an understood thing that it should be in there. The warm up is a run prep.
Yeah, it's like this is my run training plan. These are all the things in it.
Yeah.
I like it.
If you're gonna cook a meal, you gotta chop some vegetables, right? So that's the warm up. I like that, RT.
Yeah. There you go.
So strength training. Are we still calling it strength training? That where you're getting stronger.
Yeah. Until we start the movement of until we've got the movement rolling that all runners should be doing strength training, we'll still refer to it as such. And that is, yeah, you should be doing runners should be doing strength training for a whole number of reasons. You know, we have this kind of deal. If someone could tell you, we can help you run faster, get less fatigue while you're running, improve your running economy, and all you got to do is spend 2 days a week doing these things, most people would kind of hop on that. And you say, well, that thing is strength training, and all of a sudden it's again kind of that mind switch of, I think people relate more to what are the benefits of it, or react more to what the benefits, and you see more and more studies and more research that are kind of validating that whole thing, that it's, if you want to be a good runner, it's not just running that you need to be doing. You need to be strengthening in multiple planes of motion and improving your ability to put power into the ground. So from a performance standpoint, strength training is pretty crucial. From our lens that we kind of look at it from the therapy side of it, we like to look at it as, I think you're going to be in a much better position to tolerate the repetitive load. We talked about the repetitive motion and stuff that running is, that if your body is more prepared to take on that resistance and can build that resiliency, then you're less likely to come up with an injury. That's our kind of take on it.
Yeah, I think simply like from a health standpoint, even outside of a performance standpoint, bone density is huge for runners, right? Like we talk a lot about that, and stress fractures are kind of rampant across endurance athletes. So purely from a health perspective, our bodies don't really, running is not an activity that really builds bone density in athletes. And you get resistance training, so slow and heavy resistance training does exactly that for you. It builds some tendon stiffness, which is a good thing. It's how you can like land and rebound and keep running with quickness. And it builds, when those tendons yank on bones, it builds resilience in those bones. And so especially for those of us who are in our late 30s, early 40s, and we start to naturally lose our physical ability to produce force, or our muscle mass starts to decline, those become especially important, and running isn't going to sustain that for you on its own. You see those unicorns out there who are like 60 years old, and, have never stretched a muscle or warmed up or seen a dumbbell in their life, and are still running great. But in reality, I mean, that's just not all of us, and all of us need to consider the things that are going to keep us healthy, but also running and enjoying what we do. The truth is, strength training is essential to keep us doing that. I think it's easily illustrated. Sorry, I'm talking for a long time, but as people get older, you see them start to shuffle a little bit more, right? Your steps just aren't as long. You aren't leaving the ground as much. And that is mostly a function of our calf muscle, and our calf muscles lose mass a little bit more quickly than our other large muscle groups do as we age. And so it's extremely important that if you want to preserve some of that balance and not be shuffling as you age, that you strength train your calf muscle group. And so that applies across the board. But I think it's easier understood when you kind of, all of us recognize, myself being one of them, the old people who like shuffle, right? Especially at the beginning. And so I think that those are just easy ways to convince people that strength training is important as a runner.
Definitely. And I was at a race over the weekend, and it was just a community event, and you see people run, and it like looks painful at those points for them to run. And you're like, I admire that they're still doing it, but I just don't ever want to have to run like that, because I don't currently run like that. And I'm like, and that just doesn't seem fun. So yeah, I definitely can see the value in that. So and I'm sure it depends on the runner's goals, what strength training would look like, but typically, do you have something that's like a general model for your athletes of like what kinds of things they work on, or what muscle groups, or, is it resistance bands? Is it free weights? Is it, is there something that you typically have people do?
Yeah, I think a lot of, and RT can probably speak to this as well, but I think a lot of what we build our programs based off of are a couple of things that we've kind of meshed together, but really the base of it falls from a lot of Dan John's work, who I learned about from RT. And that's You're going to have a push, you're going to have a pull, you're going to have a squat, you're going to have a hinge, and you're going to have a carry in your work. And then we throw in some single leg work, which is usually somewhat calf related. But if you're talking about general health, if you're talking about runners, if you're talking about athletes, if you use those components to build a workout, you're usually going to be okay. I mean, I think you're beyond okay. You're going to be really well off. So that combined with just what we know, the physiology of runners, and the biggest muscle groups that we attack when it comes to most runners are your quadriceps, so the muscle in the front of your thigh, the lateral hip, so kind of outside of your hip, your gluteus medius, your gluteus minimus, and then your calf muscle. Those three muscle groups, if you attack and you're a healthy runner, you're going to be doing yourself a big favor. So most of what we prescribed is kind of based off of those two things, I think.
Yeah, I'll add into that is probably one of the bigger things that I see with clients that come in with us. They can be really strong in this angle, like this plane right here, going forward and back. But you start having them do lateral side to side type motions and then torsional twisting kind of stuff, and you'll start to see a little bit of the break in the chain there. And it's, for me, one of the things that I try not to lose sight of with all that stuff is training in 3 different planes of motion, right? Like Niraj said, that the hips have to be able to maintain a level of symmetry and levelness, especially as you get fatigued. Otherwise, they'll start to drop, which will make the knee kind of hop in. And the right arm, the left leg move together, right? So that's a twisting type of motion that's happening at all times whenever we're running. So, I think Niraj hit it pretty square right there, but I just needed to add in a little bit of something else to say, I guess.
No, I appreciate that, because I was like, I'm always going to wait for both of you to have some kind of answer. So that was good. So putting all of this for, let's say, like the recreational runners, because I know, professional athletes and, people with different goals are completely different. But for recreational runners, you kind of talked about how we are going to do some kind of warm up and cool down as part of our running. And you mentioned that strength training has to be in there a couple times, right? But what does that really look like? Like, would you recommend, are we running 3 times a week? Are we running 5 times a week? Are we running 7 times a week? Are we having those building days? I think you said they're building days now. Are we doing strength training on days we're running? Also, are we trying to, how is that really looking? I guess I'm throwing all these suggestions out there, like any of what I'm saying is right, but I'm sure you have a better answer.
No, I think all of them can be right. Unfortunately, the answer is it depends in a lot of cases, right? So like, what is your running experience? What is your strength training experience? What are your running goals? How far along are you in your training? And, if you're heavier into your training for a race, maybe your strength training takes a back seat and running's your priority. Whereas if you're coming off of a big race and going into kind of a lower volume of running, maybe that cycle is more based on creating power and strength training. So I think generally speaking, for somebody that's got a little bit of running experience and a little bit of strength training experience, that running 4 days a week and strength training 2 days a week is probably very realistic. And for somebody who may have more experience, running and strength training in the same day can be helpful. But I think always we want to be conscious of also like what an individual's life outside of running is like. And RT speaks really well when it comes to this kind of thing, is that, we have a certain capacity for stress on our body, and running is stress. Sleeping well is stress. Yelling at your kids is stress. Yelling at your dogs is stress, right? And so all those things can add up. And if that cup overflows a little bit, well, you're just more prone to an injury, right? And so while we may say this is ideal, I think that the prescription for people and the schedule for people has to also be very fluid. And you may not see results in 3 months or even 6 months or 9 months, and you probably know this well. running is about shoveling a little bit of dirt every day. And, maybe a couple of years down the road, you look back and you've got this mountain of dirt, but it just doesn't end well for people who try to get that whole pile moved over very quickly, right? Um, so less is more a lot of times when it comes to training.
Yeah. So to what Niraj was saying there about the stress and our capacity to take on, right? And I'm going to say in the way that our mind takes on like threats in our lives, we were saying just going out and running it's an abrupt change, right? It's a right kind of thing. Analogy that if you've got a cup that can take on 12 ounces worth of stress, try not to give it 13 or 14 ounces. If you can get in at 10 or 11, you're fine. But you have things like Niraj was saying, stress at work, stress at home, poor sleeping. You get off of your diet, your fueling habits start to take a hit. Well, that 12 ounces that you used to be able to tolerate is now maybe 9 or 10. And so if you go out and try to put on everything that you were able to do before, same run load, volume, speed work, strength training, but you've had a bad week of sleep or a really stressful week kind of thing, that's where people start to get into trouble because they feel like they need to be, I have to stick to this plan. I have to stick to it. This is my training. This is what I have to do. That's where a lot of people end up overloading what their capacity is, and we end up seeing them.
Now, is there a common thing, since you do like mostly or exclusively work with runners, is there a common thing you see people for? Like, is there a standout injury or is it kind of just all over the map? I'm just curious now. This was not a question I said I had.
I mean, I think there's a standard kind of few, right? I can think if I'm thinking about my caseload right now, I've got a handful of plantar fascia things I'm dealing with, a couple Achilles tendinopathies that are out there. The big one for me that was kind of the eye opener whenever we started getting into this was how many times I can't tell you probably how many bone stress injuries I've misdiagnosed or just missed altogether before I started really looking for them and kind of focusing in on them. And now I think I'm almost paranoid for them, but I think rightfully so when you think about the long-term effects of what they can have on kids, and especially with us, you see a lot of like high school runners that are growing and are in a pretty vulnerable place. That's a big one. That's a big one for me. Niraj, what do you see?
Yeah, I think it comes in waves. It's like plantar fascia stuff probably pops up like summertime when everybody's wearing flip-flops a ton or at the beach, or I don't know, I'm making this up in terms of times of year, but I feel like it does come in waves. Like we'll see a bunch of plantar fasciitis and then we'll see a bunch of knee pain, or we'll see some like weird hip stuff. But generally speaking, we see a lot of tendon pain, and we're ultra cautious when it comes to bone stress reactions, because I just don't think they're on enough people's radars, and the prevalence of them is probably higher than we think, and I think that we're doing people a disservice unless we're really being vigilant and looking for them, because they have pretty serious implications, like RT said. So yeah, the majority of what we deal with is tendon and bone.
And now you treat people virtually. I think I read that correctly? How does that look? I've only been to a PT like twice for my back 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I don't know what it could look like doing like a Zoom. Like, what is that like?
Yeah, it's fairly simple. I think that in time we've kind of developed a fairly I don't know. I think RT and I's radars go off when we hear certain phrases, and like we kind of have an understanding of what we're looking for when we hear people's stories. And with some things, virtual consultations are very effective. A series of movement tests that if you have somebody ready with a step stool and a yoga mat and just some space to go through a couple of movement tests, we can glean a lot of information from them. Now, traditionally in physical therapy, people think of massage and cracks and those kinds of things. And there are some cases where people would really benefit from having somebody hands-on with them. And if that's the case, we're definitely going to refer to somebody we trust if that's the case. But in the right situation, it can be really helpful if we do things the right way. And a lot of what we do is also just like digging into people's stories, because a lot of times they'll go places and they get to talk for about 60 seconds and you just miss so much. And if we're able to listen for 15 minutes, 20 minutes before we start asking questions, we've got the upper hand a lot of times, because we just have an idea of what people are going through at that point. So yeah, I think that can be very effective.
I think to that end, I think one of the major reasons that we see injuries oftentimes is training error, right? So being able to take time to, one, discuss, okay, here are the things that happened in the training that could have led to this whole deal. But then also having a structured plan as to how to return back to running. Because that's one of the big problems with people that we see, right? Is they say, yeah, I was going to PT and they said, okay, go out and try and run and see how it feels, which is far too broad in terms of just go out there and do it. So having the ability to say, okay, based on these criteria, you need to be able to do X, Y, Z. Let me see you do that right now. You pass that, fantastic. What I want you to go is I want you to try a walk, run, cycle. You're going to do 4 blocks of it. If that goes well, do it again. If you still have no pain, we're going to progress it in this manner. And so have something structured out for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month for them. So they're staying on a very regimented type of deal versus kind of this loosely tied together plan of just go back out and run and hope it doesn't hurt.
Tori, I think well as a runner, if you get a green light coming off an injury, once you get that green light, it's not like anybody's going to be pumping your brakes. I mean, you're off, right? And so I think RT hit the nail on the head there. They're like, yeah, we need things laid out for us, like to the minute of what a training run should look like. And if we don't, it's easy to run into some trouble. So yeah, that's a huge part of it as well. So yeah, I mean, I think that is just something that like we talked about before, runners don't get a lot of that. And to be honest, like as we've kind of expanded our reach to people who are just friends of runners that we've seen or family of runners that we've seen who aren't necessarily runners, but just have issues that have not been well addressed, we're seeing that works across the board. Some people just need to be heard a little bit more. So it's not always just runners that need that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, everything you guys have described, it seems like, yeah, perfect for runners, but also just like perfect for people who want to be able to move. So with that, we're gonna have to wrap up, but any last things that you wanted to share that I didn't get to ask or you didn't get to say? And then also, because we know now that we can see you virtually, but also in person, can you remind us where we can find you for both places?
Yeah, so our website is thestrideshop.com. You can book appointments with us virtually there. You can also, one of your questions, which I don't know if we did a great job of answering, was how often should people run? How often should people strength train? We did a kind of an online mini series course in which we discuss, based on your experience, based on your injury history, based on your running goals, we kind of have this flow chart of kind of where you may fall into healthy training. If you look on our website, it's called Building a Resilient Runner, and you can download that, actually the graphics from that course for free. So there's a ton of information there as well, which would be very helpful from everybody from beginning runners to kind of seasoned runners. So yeah, on our website, you can find everything you need, and then you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Stride Shop.
I guess we didn't really leave any room for RT to throw something else in there, right?
You can email us directly at thestrideshop@gmail.
There we go.
There you go. He had to have something. Well, and I will make sure I will have all the links in there so people can find you at all of the places. And thank you so much for your time and all of that really valuable information. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Carrie. If there's any way we can be a resource for you, we really appreciate you having us. So if there's anything we can do to help or promote your stuff, please just let us know. We'd be happy to.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I just want to thank Niraj and RT again for sharing all of their expertise on how to stay healthy as a runner, or really anybody who needs to move throughout their life, which I think is most of us. So awesome to hear from them. So great to have a different perspective on even just like a warm up and a cool down, how it can be something as simple as going for a walk. So really great stuff. Loved hearing from them. Make sure you check out their site or on Instagram, because they do have lots of information on their website, as well as obviously how to get in touch with them if you need their assistance. I also want to point out, because I'm always going to be pointing out from now until May, that we are doing an event to benefit the Youth Mental Health Project. And today I want to talk about the 12-hour run that I'm going to be doing before our event, just to kind of, raise awareness, or even just like, get excitement going about the event that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be doing a 12-hour run in our local area. I'm going to try to meet up with a bunch of our running groups, but it felt relevant to talk about today because we talked about how to stay healthy with running. So that's definitely something I'm going to have to focus on to be able to do the 12-hour runs, just to make it a little extra fun for everybody else, not just me who's going to be doing the running. We are going to have a little contest who can guess the amount of miles I will complete in the 12 hours. And the way you're going to enter the contest is by donating that dollar amount to the Youth Mental Health Project, just as like a fun thing. Obviously, you don't have to do it, or, whatever. If you want to still donate, you can donate whatever amount that you want, obviously, but just to make it fun, doing the amount that you think I'm going to run, and then you would send a screenshot to our email so that you can be entered to win a prize. Again, just to make it fun, get everybody involved, build a little bit of buzz. But yeah, so again, I'm sure I'll talk about this from now until May, and probably even after a little bit, just to kind of debrief again with everybody. But it should be really fun. We do have a virtual option to participate as well. So for people who are not local to me in PA, feel free to check out our site, which will be linked in here also, just because, who doesn't want to help benefit the mental health of our youth, right? That's all I got now. Thank you again for listening, and again, I hope you learned something from our interview. Thank you for tuning into Raising Runners. New episodes every Tuesday, and we are always looking to talk to people about running, mental health, or anything along the spectrum that can help our young athletes, or just talking to runners or parents and coaches of our young runners as well. Hopefully you find our resources helpful. If you have questions, comments, or anything else, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.